Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for Broadway World. The latest from world-renowned architect and Tony Award-winning set designer David Rockwell is the glorious new Performing Arts Center, PAC NYC, located at 251 Fulton Street. And I caught up with David, who took us through this exciting new venture. Well, first of all, David, I'm thrilled to be sitting with you here at your latest venture, the PAC.
Yes.
So how did this all come about for you?
Well, I'd been involved in kind of rebuilding, parts of rebuilding, really since 9/11. I've been a resident of Lower Manhattan for more than 3 decades. And in 2020, I got a phone call saying they were finally building this really final piece, or this amazing piece of ground zero that had been promised for so long, an arts center. And would I be interested in getting involved in creating a lobby in the interior spaces? And I said, absolutely.
Okay, so when you start to work on something, how do you start? Like, how did you start with this?
Well, you always start with research. You always start with trying to figure out what's the problem you really need to solve. And that process of research kind of defines a lot of what you need to do. So in this case, the building had been designed. It's this beautiful, pristine marble cube that's backlit and floats over the ground because all of the infrastructure below it was for the Port Authority.
Yeah.
So that was the canvas we were asked to take part in. And then the other part of the research was understanding that you were going to be welcoming people coming up the stairs, and the first thing you'd see is a ceiling. So I started to think about how do audiences come together? How do you come together to celebrate before and after a show? And I wanted, as you came up the steps, the ceiling to kind of peek over, and as you walked in, to get this warm embrace, like a space that would just give the guests a hug and say welcome. And it's kind of the soft underbelly of the beautiful hard marble cube.
Yeah.
So that was the first approach. And then the other thing I thought about was circulation-wise. As you know, I'm very interested in choreography and theater and in architecture. And in this case, you come in the building and there's a strong access right to what we're looking at here, the terrace and the backlit stone. And that leads to the restaurant. There's a small lobby stage. But when a show begins, you've got to move in the opposite direction, or perpendicular. So all of that sort of fed into my process, and I started to sketch the ceiling that would be kind of the iconic piece that would also be wayfinding. By using wood ribs with internal lighting, you could have a pre-show ritual where the rest of the ribs dim a little bit, and the ribs that lead east-west to the elevators and the stairs get brighter. And so in some ways, the ceiling kind of dances as a pre-show ritual.
I love that, because you walk in here, the ceiling, everything about this lobby is stunning.
Thank you so much.
Before we sat here, I'm touching the textures, which is a big deal for you.
It is.
Texture has always been, because you grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But then when you were like 12, you moved to Mexico?
Correct.
And that changed everything for you, didn't it?
It did. You know, my mom was involved in community theater, and we lived in this beautiful suburb in New Jersey with beautiful houses, and all of the theater or drama happened in the theater.
Yeah.
Mexico was this explosion of essentially everything I know turned inside out. Small houses, but huge public markets and tree-lined, rose-lined streets, and playing in the street, and color and spectacle, all of that kind of just, I think, hypnotized me.
Yeah.
And so I got into the theater of public life, and the theater that happens in public spaces. And as you mentioned, texture and color were everything. The quality of light was inspiring.
So that's what inspired you, I'm sure. I have to tell you, as you know, this is one of my favorite books, just so you know.
You're so kind.
Well, I sit this on my coffee table and I realize, you know, it's not sort of the story of your life, but it's the story of what you've created throughout your life. And you know, you're so big on texture and everything you've created, from theaters and restaurants and spaces and squares and buildings. All went back probably to when you moved to Mexico and you sort of saw how you could do, like, you know, you saw about the color in the streets, just colors and textures and everything. I'm sure it influenced a lot of stuff that you've done here too. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's no question. I think the prime thing the book explores, and it's one of the things that I've been interested in my whole life, is how do people come together to congregate and celebrate?
Yeah.
And how does that exist in the world of architecture and theater, and how do they inspire each other? So for me, I see this kind of wonderful feedback loop between the two art forms. And so here we're in a space about theater, but it's architecture. And then we actually got to do the sets for the opening show here. And this set is a flexible set that'll be here for the next couple of months. And it will constantly evolve during the opening of the theater. So how great is that?
Yeah, so let's talk about the combination of what's on this floor.
Yeah.
And one floor up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
So this floor, you come up the stairs.
Yeah.
And the ceiling kind of greets you. And you mentioned these felt walls that are made from Fitz felt, wrap the room. And there's 4 main points that this lobby connects. The first is a little stage right in the lobby where there'll be free music throughout the day. And that stage sits right against the glass wall. So we don't make it a secret that there's free theater when you come up here. You see that right away. That creates a kind of energy source. And then as you move in, there's you can see these kind of dropped wood nodes that are a little bit like abstracted chandeliers that happen over the lobby stage, the entrance to the restaurant, and then the entrance to the terrace. And within that, there's many different ways to sit. Because when you come here, you may be a group of 3 or 4, you'll find your own place. The furniture and the layout is in some ways like little mini sets, the way you would create a kind of set within a set. But the star are the people eating here who get a chance to be a part of this space.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the set design that you designed.
The theaters are exquisite. Josh Ramos and Rex architected the building and the theaters, and beautiful wood walls. For the sets, I wanted to pick up on the notion of refuge, which is what the opening concerts are called. I also wanted to reference the kind of tapestry quality of the stone. And I thought, as I looked at the program and thought about what's the commonality between all of this? And part of the commonality is it really is an overlay of artists from around the world who make New York their home, who are creating work for this space. So we created a custom graphic that covers the 3 portals and a series of sliders that can close the stage off or open it. And the graphic is deep, deep blues with a kind of warm colors inspired by the stone that are a map of New York overlaid on a map of 8 other cities around the globe that artists are working from. And out of that emerges this kind of beautiful pattern that looks like a tapestry, but the backstory is it really honors the relationships of artists from around the world working here in New York.
Okay, now let's talk about the exciting opening day that you had down here. I mean,
oh my God.
Tell me all about that.
Well, of course, it went from construction site to opening day in 3.5 minutes.
Totally.
And it's still a construction site. But so the setup was this open space, these sliders, and a large platform that could come up and down stage, and a smaller platform that could come through that.
Yeah.
Not knowing who the artists were going to be. So as we started teching the show and working with Alex Coletti, who's a brilliant producer, Jen Shriver, who I love, who lit it, we started to really use those pieces to reveal Cynthia Erivo. Unbelievable performance. And then a whole series of incredible artists, choruses, local artists. And the final piece of the concert was James Taylor coming out on a simple piano and playing 5 or 6 songs. And it was just magical to be in the very first use of this space.
Yeah. And there's going to be concerts here all the time, right? Some wonderful people coming up
Amazing
here.
people. And so we had to think about what are the tools they might want to use. There's the sliders. There's also an LED wall that's a horizontal proportion. So most of the time it feels like a scenic piece, but it can be used to reveal Ben Platt or LaChance and I think Brian Stokes Mitchell. So
the best of the best is coming down here.
Yeah, this is such an interesting part of New York that hasn't had a kind of social center. So you've got the beautiful memorial and the museum and lots of offices, but as you come up the stairs and step into this space and then move up to the theaters, you're in a kind of different world of a performance that I think is going to be important locally, but also important globally as an attractor to what makes New York so great, which is the arts.
Yeah. Let's talk about combining art and architecture together.
Well, I think we start by research, as I said,
Yeah.
and out of that, kind of emerging from that, a point of view that guides every decision. So, and I don't feel it's at all necessary for guests to understand what that point of view is. I think I've used this example before, but when we started with Nobu in '94, I tasted his food. We came up with a kind of scenario that looked at his history. From worked in Peru, master sushi chef, lived in the countryside. That led to many decisions that give it an underlying foundation. The same is true here. We came up with a point of view about circulation, lots of thoughts about how 150 people become really a series of smaller groups, which is why the furniture is not all the same, that it's kind of broken up into smaller groups. We came up with a point of view about softness and warmth, which is why there's leather and felt in these fabrics. We came up with a point of view around how to relate to the beautiful stone, which during the day is kind of beautiful, warm amber colors, but at night, when it gets front lighting, it's silver blue. So the color scheme of everything here works with both of those. So you come up with a way to not have, you want to have every decision not be arbitrary. And so you need an underlying point of view.
Yeah. Like I said, we're here
It's an underlying like 10 times.
Yeah, no, but that's what you have to do.
The other thing is these ribs, these wood ribs that light, in the evening, of course, dim.
Yeah.
And some of them go off and we sculpt it with other patterns. But they very much envelop you in light, much like the building does. So there's a relationship there too. In this case, this is a place that is, its ambition is to be a community place during the day for people who are not coming to see a show, who just might want to come hear music and get a drink, but then at night it has to evolve to kind of be part of the experience of going to the theater.
Yeah. But see, I like that they offer free entertainment here where people wander in and say, oh my gosh.
It's so special.
You know, it's like, oh, this is wonderful. Maybe I'll see something else here. Or maybe I'll go uptown and see something else. You know, families visit down here to see the memorial and things, and tourists fly in from all around the world to come to New York City and to come down here now. You know, I speak to all these tourists and I'm like, where are you going on your trip? Like, oh, we're going down to the memorial, the World Trade Center. And then there's this beautiful, you know, PAC that is just opened where people can walk up that incredible staircase and walk in the lobby and totally, you know.
They had an open house day the day after opening just for the public to come in, and it was packed and people were, you know, discovered a kind of new space.
But that's nice, though, to introduce. That's what you've done with your work. I mean, your restaurants, your buildings, your theaters. I mean, you introduce people to a whole new world.
My first day in New York, when I walked around at 11 and went to the theater and had lunch and walked around Times Square, my perception of New York, my kind of love affair in New York, began with everything that is the kind of mixing chamber of the ground floor. So in this case, it's elevated up one level, but it has the same goal, which is to be that kind of welcoming space.
Because I think, was the first Broadway show you saw Fiddler on the Roof?
It was.
Okay, with Herschel Bernardi.
Yes.
And it was at the Majestic Theater, had moved from the Imperial, yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, those were those beautiful Boris Aronson set designs, so I think you collect, right?
And they're now in the Civilian, the original Boris Aronson drawing for Fiddler.
I just have to throw it out there to our Broadway World audience that if you have to come down here first to see the beautiful new PAC, but if you have to visit the Civilian, because what you have done up there for the theater, I mean, there are set designs of all these Broadway shows. The Blue Room has the ongoing changing, you know, you change the exhibits all the time. It's a theater goer's dream to visit there, but we were there the other day and it's changed again.
It's a dream come true for me to create a place that is kind of honors all the behind the scenes theater artists that make the theater work and create a kind of place for guests and the people in the theater community to come together.
But everything you design, your buildings or whatever, it's all full of a version of art. And going back to Fiddler, it was Boris Aronson, which was a takeoff on Marc Chagall.
Yeah.
And I'm sure sitting there in that theater, when you saw those beautiful, like Chagall-esque Boris Aronsons, I'm sure meant the world to you and was life-changing for you too, with what you do today.
Yeah, it's also about having a vocabulary that looks at all of the arts and is curious about it. I think the key thing for me is to stay, curious and not know the answer before you begin. That moment of kind of indecision where you're really studying the problem and open to it. By the way, Gene Shin, who's an amazing artist, created that beautiful piece.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, talk about that piece. That is stunning. What is it made of?
It's made of buttons that she'd been collecting for many years, and it sort of speaks to the notion of reuse and kind of renewal. And it also is a shimmering material, a lot like the building, and it is kind of abstraction of the map, as you can see.
Yeah. See, that's from here it looks totally different. I'm sure when we get closer to that, we're going to say, oh my gosh, it's made of buttons.
Yeah. Well, that idea that things are as interesting from the distance as close up is important.
Yeah. It's at two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Was there a specific thing that you were having a problem solving that something unlocked for you with putting this together?
Well, the first problem to solve was circulation.
Okay.
And circulation is everything when you're coming into a building and you want to know where to go. And as you know, with the JetBlue terminal, I brought in Jerry Mitchell because I thought dance would inform circulation. In this case, when you find an opportunity to have several issues and layers solved by one idea, it's kind of thrilling. And finding a way to have softer walls in this wood ceiling that wrapped down to them that could be flexible throughout the day and night, and perforated metal above it so it deals with acoustics. You'll be able to have a conversation here. It's why it's important to stay open to different ideas as you're doing research, because you don't know how they're going to coalesce.
Yeah. I'm sure you're proud of everything you've designed because they're all so beautiful. What are you the proudest of PAC? Of the design here, what it stands for, this building now, what it's going to offer to millions of people that come here?
I think as someone who's gone to the theater their whole life and loves the 41 amazing Broadway theaters, which you honor at Civilian, I think what I'm happiest about here, or I find most exciting, is this is a place where audience can get together before and after a show and have an extended experience. And that doesn't really happen a lot in New York. In New York, because of the premium of real estate, that entry experience is compressed. Radio City is one of my favorite spaces in the world, and that is as beautifully choreographed as any dance you can ever imagine. It's a lower vestibule. You pop up to that dramatic second-story space. Here, it works in a different way, but that notion of welcoming an audience, having them have a place throughout the day before and after the show was a unique opportunity. It's probably something that's been with me for a long time. I do think designs take a long time. You have to have had the ideas before you get to the project.
Yeah.
You mentioned art. You've got to be kind of looking at things that inspire you and then figure out a way to take those to some other level in the project you're doing.
No, because what's great about this building, it is so warm sitting here with you and so comfortable, and it's such an open space here that you could sit anywhere and, like you said, have a whole different kind of conversation.
I think the thing I'm proudest of is I love being a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And I think this is a contribution to the art scene in New York that's different than what's been here before and will be a real contribution.
Beautiful. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time
Thank you.
to sit with me here,
I liked it.
I do too.
I always like seeing you, and I liked our little I like being on this banquette with you and looking at this amazing space.
And just thank you for doing what you do, because like you said, people come down here and this can give them a whole new thing to do while they're down here.
Thank you for championing theater.
Yeah.
Theater needs champions.
Thank you very much, my friend.